goods, namely the producer price index, slowed to 6.9% in September year on year. That's down from a rise of 7.2% in August. But how is the manufacturing sector really faring? Well, to give us some insight, I'm joined by Conrad Bezuidenhout. He's an executive director at the Manufacturing Circle. Thank you so much for joining us.
That's good to be here.
Now, let's talk about the PPI number. Is this really reflective of what's happening on the ground, given that it's an average number? Or are manufacturers, particularly your members, really battling?
Well, I think they are battling because demand's not great in the domestic market and in some of our export markets. And this may be part of the reason why PPI has gone down, because they cannot price as competitively as they could. But then, of course, on the input side, electricity, resources and so on have also dropped. And there may actually be certain instances where the labor components of their costs have been reduced as a result of mechanization and so on. So there's a number of things on the positive side. There are some things on the negative side as well.
Still sticking with the negative, Eskom has been granted permission to raise tariffs by 12.69% or 12.7% next year. I presume your members are not very happy about that.
Well, look, there's no principal problem with the fact that Eskom's increasing the prices. The difficulty comes in the position that it puts us in relation to our competitive markets, where energy prices are actually falling. They are not increasing. So we need to get to a situation where there is a smooth glide path for electricity going up, that we don't have these bunched up increases, and that we have a more diverse basket of energy options at better prices, and where we can see a situation where manufacturing gets supported in terms of the broader ecosystem as well.
Now, we talk all the time, Conrad, about the challenges in the manufacturing sector. Did you get much joy at all from Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene when he spoke about some of the things on offer for the manufacturing sector?
Look, I think we're always thankful if there's a recognition in policy, which is essentially what MTBPS is a policy statement for manufacturing, but the downfall comes with the execution. MTBPS is a longer term view. It's a wish list of what we are going to do over the medium term expenditure period. And the degree to which we can stick to that wish list will depend or will determine the degree to which government will be able to successfully execute those things. In other words, are our incentives growth focused, or do we want them to have more redistributional type of impact? Do we really look across government at how we determine administered prices? That has got fiscal implications, and interest rate inflationary implications and so on, and how do we support our manufacturing sector to close the gap in our trade account, so that we can have a more supportive macroeconomic policy. We heard the former Reserve Bank governor speak about inflation targeting. Inflation targeting is something that they do with a very blunt instrument called interest rates. Those interest rates are useless if we set administered prices, for instance, in an undetermined way, or if fiscal policy, our spending, doesn't dovetail with how we implement monetary policy. And there has been a growing gap over the last couple of years.
I remember a couple of years ago, people saying, oh, we need the rand to be at 8.50 against the dollar. It's way above that. The rand is relatively weak, and yet we continue to see that exports are underperforming relative to imports. Presumably, the rand or the level of it doesn't seem to be a factor in your ability to export.
Look, if the broader ecosystem was healthy for manufacturing, then a weaker rand would most probably have had much better effects than it has now. But with a weaker rand, you've got both positive aspects and negative aspects. The negative aspects being your imported inflation. And as we have seen over the last couple of months, the imported inflation on top of the administered price increases, the bunched up ones that we've seen, renders us much more vulnerable and makes us miss out on the positive aspects. That being said, there were manufacturers, PPI shot up for a while. That wasn't only because of the cost increases as a result of the rand, but they actually could compete better in export and domestic markets, allowing them to price more competitively.
Now, in the beginning of the third quarter, in July, we saw the NUMSA strikes, which had a bad impact on the manufacturing sector. How has the sector been faring since, barring all the negative issues that we've spoken about?
Look, I think that the positives are that things are coming back on steam again. The mines are coming to a point where they are coming back to the output levels that they had before. Some of them a little bit earlier than we expected, because some of it actually can take up to 6 months or more to happen. So I think we must really laud them for that. There are some construction projects that are starting to pull off in the private and the public sector, but we really need a solid pipeline of these things to lift our demand for locally manufactured goods. We need to prefer buying local, both public and private sector procurers, as well as our private citizens, because greater volumes actually solves a whole lot of other problems for you as well, will help you to cope with them much better.
And lastly, 2015, what's your outlook for the sector?
Oh, it's a little bit too early to say now. We would have to look more towards what's going to happen in terms of the political environment. Political uncertainty, allied to that what's happening in the labour space, this aggregation there could be both good, or if we don't work to contain it in the way that it should be contained and try and go with the challenges and the opportunities that it presents, then we might see a similar or a repeat of what has happened in the current year, where we had expectation for marginal growth, 2%, in the event that there wouldn't have been labour issues. And now we sit at a situation where we might see shrinkage at the end of the year. So next year is not going to be fireworks unless something big changes. We may see middling growth of 1-2% again.
All right. Well, that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you so much for your time, as always. That was Conrad Bezuidenhout. He's an executive director at the Manufacturing Circle.